All right, and we're live. What's happening, people? Welcome to the show. I'm Michael Kurkowski. Thank you for joining me. Closing out 2024 in this episode. So, in tradition, since I started this show at the end of the year, I like to put together the biggest lessons that have impacted me or have I learned from guests on the show, from conversations that we've had, and share with you to close out this year. It's been another beautiful year. Some amazing guests have come on, some people that I've connected with before, as well as a lot of brand new people that I got a chance to connect with, hear their insights, and hear their stories. It's been an absolute blessing and a half, and I narrowed it down to 10 lessons that I want to share with you today. The first year I did this, I think I did 42, which was just way too much at the time. I felt like I had like 30 seconds to dive into each one. Otherwise, it would have been a 4 hour marathon episode. So I wanted to share the 10 that have not only were really great ideas, but things that I really focused on trying to implement into my own life this year or just dive in a little bit deeper because I think it's really powerful. So, some of them you might have heard before if you've been listening to the show. But that actually is a lesson that I'm going to dive into towards the end of this. So, without further ado, let's dive into them. All right, no particular order, but lesson number one is practical optimization. So, the optimal versus practical debate. This idea came about first when I was talking with Alex Sulkin on the podcast. So Alex been a multiple time guest. This year he came on after he released his most recent book, and this was a topic that we dove into. Alex is a brilliant coach. I got a chance to meet him a long time ago, and it's always a interesting conversation, and we get into some interesting topics. And this was one of them. So the idea of optimal versus practical is we're in the optimization boom right now. There's so much information about the best way to do something in anything, strength training, mindset practice, productivity, time management. There are some great people that are really putting out good information about the best ways to optimize. So it's really great. I mean, this is a bonus. This is a plus in so many ways. But it can also stem into jumping from one thing to another so quickly. And if you're always looking for optimization of everything, then there's always another way to do something. And as everybody knows, like jumping into something new, grass is always greener, is always a very romantic and sexy idea to go into. And I think a lot of people that I've spoken to are confused about which direction to go. So when we talked with Alex, this idea of optimal versus practical was if you just focus on what is most practical and where you are at the time of your life of where you're in and commit to that and do that in the best capacity and the best effort, then the practical actually is the optimal. So this was kind of a mind jump for me, which I thought was really cool. But I had a recent story that came up with me on this was I had a client who was just getting started with me, and we just finished our first week. It was like our third call that we've had, and she was in the idea of like, well, I didn't do that great this week. Like, I don't know, like I wanted to do better. And I asked, well, what did you do this week? And she trained 3 days during the week. Okay, going from zero. She never didn't train for a long time before. So I said, you know that you just did a 300% increase this week than what you did before. Yeah, so you went from 0 days working out for a long time to you trained 3 days during the week. That's a 300% jump. That's pretty freaking awesome. And it was kind of just that shift of like, yeah, you can always aim to get better. But if you actually look at like what did you actually do? What's the most practical way? This was actually a huge victory and a huge jump. So optimization, it's become its own industry. Like there's great things that are coming from it, but it's also can lead into this wild goose chase of always jumping from one thing to the next, trying a million different things. Where if you really align with what's most practical to you, this is always going to yield results. It's always going to generate a profit. It might not be the fastest profit that you're getting or the fastest track on success, but it's still a step forward. And I think in our culture, we almost demonize or put down practical, thinking that you're settling, right? It's like that if you can always do more, um, and you kind of just think down on actually just making an incremental step forward. But I think when you're looking at winning the long run, if you're looking at really looking at things for a lifestyle aspect of building into your life so you can repeat it over and over again, then focusing on what's most practical at the time that you're at is way better than what's most optimal. So that was a big takeaway, and I wanted to share that right off the bat of um, of kicking this off. Okay. So lesson number two, if you have to pick one first, a strong body is before a strong mind. So this was the most controversial take that I had this year, and I got a lot of pushback from some people through social media on this, and I wanted to speak on this. I've spoken about it numerous times this year, but this was the most powerful thing that I really dug my heels on, and I want to share with you. So there's a great quote I love by Seneca that I'll kick this off is we treat the body rigorously so it will not be disobedient from the mind. And I think with Seneca, one of the most powerful Stoic philosophers that we know is talking about treating the body in the best possible way to get in the best physical shape that you can. And the reason I thought this was powerful, and I thought a lot about this, is if you think of what is a strong mind, if you actually dive down into what is a strong mindset, it's the story that we tell ourselves, but what are the traits that you have when you have a strong mindset? Probably what's going to come up is being confident, being capable, optimistic, disciplined. So, by just focusing on getting in the best physical health that you can be, you're naturally going to build more confidence. You're going to feel more capable of it. You're going to probably be more optimistic because you're seeing changes with it. And the only way to get there is to be disciplined. So, by default, by just working on your physical health, it will naturally flow downstream into helping you build a stronger mindset. While if you reverse that, it's a lot easier to procrastinate on taking action if you think that you need to be in a perfect state of mind at all times in order to do the things to get to the goals that you have. So that's why I think that if you had to choose one first, build your physical health and it's going to flow downstream into your mental health. And the more that I talked about this, the more I dove into and people who dug their heels on, no, you need to have a strong mindset. You need to have that, you need to be in a good mental state in order to do anything else. A lot of people that were saying that were people that I know were not doing very well in their physical health. So it's often very easy to think that you need to be in this perfect state in order to take action. And the only way that you can change your physical state is by taking action. You have to do it, whether you're in a good state of mind or not. If you just focus on getting into the best physical health that you can possibly be, it is going to transcend into other areas of your life just by osmosis. There is going to get to a point where just focusing on physical maybe is not the end all. Then you go into the other realms. But I brought this up is because if you are looking to make a change in your life, if you're looking to make habit switches, I think the best way to do this first is look at what can you do for your physical health first, and then it's going to translate into the mental side. So both are important, but if you're forced to choose one versus the other, focus on building the greatest shape that you possibly can physically, and it's going to help you more so mentally. Right? Lesson number two. All right. Number three, this is a quote. It's freeing to admit that we're really all amateurs. So this was from one of the first episodes of 2024 that I did with Jonathan Goodman. So Jonathan was one of my favorite people to talk to. This was one of my favorite episodes actually I did over the year, and we did it right off the bat in 2024. He came on after creating his book, The Obvious Choice, which is out right now, and he put out a thread about 20 mindset shifts that he was putting into this book. So I asked him to come on and we dove into a bunch of them. We tried to get to all of them, didn't have time, probably got to like 15. But this was the one that was most powerful and most personally, probably to me, in this realm, is it's so easy to look at everyone else's highlight reels out there now with social media, with YouTube, with all the information that we're consuming at all points. And we think that everybody's got it figured out. There's some secret sauce or secret recipe that other people have found out, while we're sitting with our head in our hands, wondering where we are, how we can get to the next level, just feeling down, maybe unmotivated, or feeling lost in what we're trying to do, and thinking that everybody else has got it figured out and we're alone in this process. The reality is that nobody has this shit figured out, okay? But there's a great quote that came with this that I love where it's no one knows what they're doing, but some just do it anyway. And I think that's one of the best things that you can do is go into it with faith, with an idea, with your best intentions, but realize that there is no road, their perfect format, perfect playbook that is going to get you exactly where you think you're going to be. The ones that succeed are the ones that go in the fog, not seeing the clear path ahead, and just continuously try to put their best foot forward and figure it out along the way. So that was to me of the, in the work that I'm doing with trying to grow the show, with trying to grow my other businesses as well, is it is always an easy avenue to think that other people have this figured out. And why am I stuck in not knowing what to do, what the next step is, realizing that nobody's got it figured out. Just take the best step forward that you can on the day, look back on it, see how it went, and then make another step going forward. Okay. We're all in this for the long run. There is no shortcut to get there. There's no foolproof way to do it that has any real value or authenticity to it. And the fact that everybody, regardless of where they are, is trying to figure it out one step at a time. So if you're one of those people that has felt alone in the struggles that you've had or have struggled this year and you're trying to figure out the next step, just realize that you're in good company with a lot of really good people. We're all trying to figure it out. Just take one step forward. And that's what I'm trying to implement. I looked at that a lot over this year, and I'm bringing this message into the next year of 2025 with all the goals that I have. And yeah, one of the most powerful ones that I felt going into this year. So, all right, lesson number four. Difference between a change and a transformation is a transformation means you can't go back. So, this was a question that popped up throughout the year that I just could not get off of. It started a while ago when I talked with Dax Moy on the podcast, and he first put this idea into my head. And I probably asked this question probably a dozen times with different people on the podcast this year, asking, what do you think the difference is between a change and a transformation? And the reason I thought it was big is because this word transformation has been co-opted specifically in the fitness world because it's very sexy, it's easy to sell, it's a very powerful word. So people throw out these 8-week transformations or 12-week transformations out there. And the reality is that the timeline of that is enough to make a change, but a transformation is something different. And I couldn't figure out what that differentiation is, no matter how much I was working on it. And the reason I thought it was so powerful is because the words that we use in our subconscious and what we speak out, they truly matter. Okay. Every word that we say out here has an impact on how we go into actions. So I knew there was something to this. And the one that gave me the best answer was Jenny Patton. So Jenny and Eric are great coaches. They came on the podcast and I asked them this question. And Jenny threw this out. She said, well, transformation means you can't go back. A butterfly can't go back to being a caterpillar no matter what it does. It didn't change, it transformed. And that one hit me right off the bat. So I've heard people say all the time is I need to make a change. What do I need to do to change these habits? But in my head, it's led me to a more powerful question is I want to transform. If you say those two different questions to yourself or those two statements, one hits a little bit different. And I think when we go into the goals that we have, a layer deeper of going in is not how is this going to change my life, but how is this going to transform me into another identity of who I am. And I think when you look at it that way and you're really going into how to create these changes and turn them into transformations, you're going to look at the things a little bit deeper of looking at the foundational things, the fundamental things of what you need to do. And a transformation takes time. And when you get there, you realize that no, the person that you were before you made this declaration is not even the person that you identify with anymore. And I think that's a really powerful thing. So if you're looking to make changes, just switching that over into using the word transform versus change, see what comes up. This is something of a practice that I did at the end of 2024 here, of going into the goals that I had and asking myself, how is achieving this going to transform me into somebody different? This was really powerful. So it was one of those things that I could not get off this year, and I really wanted to get into the depth of it. And Jenny gave me this best one. I wanted to share it with you here. All right, let's keep moving on. So, lesson number 5 is progress is not built on variety and change, but execution. Do few things very well with great focus, and it will beat out many things done decently. So, this came from the episode that I did with Oz Aponte. So, Oz, if you're listening, dude, I love you to death. You're one of my favorite people to talk to. Unbelievable coach out of San Diego in California. And Oz came on the show this year after he wrote an article about doing the same program in physical training for 3 years straight with very little variation, a couple tweaks here and there, but continuously made progress for 3 years in a row without changing the program of what he was doing. And what brought to my mind on this is that variety is always something that we're trying to get into. And if we don't see immediate change with something, we're always looking for what do we need to change or what do we need to vary into our lives or into our habits in order to get to the next level. Where so often it's just sticking to the course and just staying with the thing that you're doing is going to yield the results that you're getting into. And there's a question that comes up from this lesson that I ask a lot that I think is really powerful. It's whenever you get into this realm of wondering what to do or are you on the right track, is I ask this question, do I need to know more or do I need to use what I know better? And when you look at this question is if you go into the beginning of it, do I need to know more? Do I need to add more stuff into my repertoire? Or do I just need to do what I said I'm going to do in a better way? And oftentimes the latter is the thing that's going to yield the best results. It's you don't need to switch up, you don't need to change everything. Is often you just need to put more emphasis, more intention, and more focus into the things that you're actually doing. And I think if you're looking to really make strength that's going to stick, not just a flash in the pan PR or make success that is going to really not just give you a short term return on your investment, but really turn you into who you want to be, it's often more the latter. It's you need to use what you know better. All the information's out there. You probably know exactly what you need to do, but just you need to do it in a better way. And that's what Oz taught me in this lesson of doing this program for 3 years straight and continuously seeing results is because he didn't jump ship, he didn't change things up. He just stuck the course and then eventually broke through and got to the next breakthrough. I thought that was so powerful. And that's a question and a lesson that I'm going into even more so going into 2025. All right, number 6. The power is in the pause. A meaningful silence is more valuable than meaningless words. So I think this was actually a lesson that I talked about last year as well, but it even came more prevalent into this year. The greatest conversations that I've had, they've had many more pauses than others. Being intentional with your words and not just filling the void with noise has a deep power to it. And I think in our time now where we're consumed with so much information and so much noise at all different times, it's very easy to just fill those gaps with more noise, more information, or more words. Where often some of the best things come from sitting in the silence for a minute, and then the right words or the right answers are going to come to you. And this has shown more and more that the people that I've gotten so much value from that have come on the podcast are not quick to just answer a question. They actually sit back and they're not afraid of the silence. And this brought up, there's a verse in the Tao that is the Tao Te Ching that was really powerful to me where There's a few different interpretations of it, but one is a house is made of four walls, but it's in the space between that makes it a home. Music is only music because the space between the notes, otherwise, it's just noise. And this has meant a lot to me. And I've seen this in work in physical training where the time that you spend in between sets versus when the bell or the weight is in your hands is just as powerful or just as important as when you're actually going into the grind. And to not fill every moment with action, to actually not fill every moment with movement, because movement is not progress. Oftentimes, it's sitting back and being still is what we need to do more than just go, go, go and just go into the next action. So I think this lesson transcends not just the conversation or just having power in your words, but in everything that we do. So action just for the sake of action is not always the answer. Oftentimes it's sitting back in the time of inaction or just sitting in the pause is going to be more powerful than actually just doing more movement. And this is a lesson that I know I'm going to go back to over and over again in all the work that I do. But the more time you sit in that silence, it can be a lot more meaningful than just meaningless words and just throwing more shit out there. All right. Number seven is this came from the best lesson of this is just the best way to succeed is to have less shitty days than great days. So if you want to have the best of days, start with having less shitty ones. It's a beautiful thing to have a 10 out of 10 day where everything goes right. Your body feels loose and strong. Your sinuses are clear. You hit a personal record. You make a huge sale. You hit every green light on the way home. You win 10K on a scratch off ticket. But most days, you didn't sleep great. You woke up sick. You forgot to get gas, so you're running late. And for some reason, your hamstring got pulled when you stand up from your desk. No matter how many great days you have, there will always be many more non-memorable, monotonous, and unmemorable days. By aiming to make a two into a five or a four into a seven, even the bad days get better and better. To reach for the ceiling is great, but elevating your floor makes even the tough days when you stumble and fall a much shorter drop, making the distance from bad to great that much shorter in your journey. So this is the best productivity lesson that I received is if you focus on raising your floor versus always raising your ceiling, then the monotonous, the tough days, the challenges are going to be fewer and fewer, and they're actually going to be less and less challenging. So I remember Luca Hussover was the first one that we talked about on the podcast about this is everybody's always thinking about optimize for the best day possible. But no matter how many great days you have, you're always going to have many more days that are unmemorable or monotonous or tedious. The more you make those days a little bit better, turning a 2 out of 10 day into a four or a five into a seven, then you keep elevating your floor. So even if you have a bad day, it's going to be significantly better than it was before. So I think this is the most powerful thing of just increasing your productivity is instead of just always reaching for the ceiling, focus on elevating your floor at all times. All right, next lesson is if you want to crush your morning, crush your evening. The hour or two before the day ends is more powerful than the most optimized masterclass of a morning. Okay. So I started this at the beginning of this year. I wrote a an essay about the four things that I was trying to prioritize going into 2024. And one of them was focusing on evening routine over morning routine. So before finishing the day is taking a little bit of time and just detailing out as much as I can about what I want to accomplish going into the next day. And this was not just what I want to do, but also who do I want to be? What are the core values and the traits that I'm trying to bring into every action, every interaction, every conversation that I have? And the more I worked on this, the more detailed I got in it, where it was one of the most powerful shifts that I did in creating more energy for myself throughout the day. So if you think about it, I got into as much detail of in the morning time when I was going into training, I knew exactly what I was going to do into my programming going into the next day, but I still wrote it down. If I was doing like an iron cardio session or a snatch day or whatever it was, I wrote it out. the thing is, I've been training long enough that I know that even when I woke up, I was not going to miss or forget what I was doing the next day. But still, just putting it down on paper, it got out of my head so I could wake up to execute and not to think. And this is such a huge shift in productivity, is because everything that we do, every little decision that we make takes a little bit of energy, okay? It might be a small incremental amount that you don't recognize it at the moment that you make the decision. But if you make more and more of those small little decisions and you think about it more, by the end of the day, it's all those little leaks add up throughout the day, and it's going to be more challenging to have the energy that you want to be focused and be intentional on the things that really are most valuable to you. So I think of it like a sand dial. Like as soon as you wake up in the morning, that sand dial turns over. If you have to think about what's the next thing that you're going to do, right off the bat, it starts just dripping down a little bit faster and a little bit faster. And then by the afternoon, going into something that maybe was really valuable or something that you wanted to be really focused on, all of a sudden you have a little bit less energy of doing this. And the best way to hack this is before you end the day, is just taking out that sheet of paper and just detailing out as much as you can about what is going to go on in the next day. It's not going to be perfect. There's always going to be, things that jump in, but the best that you can, and then you're going to be able to wake up to execute and not to think. And I found one of the most powerful things that I didn't realize from doing this is it actually increased my power and sleep latency. I got to bed faster because I didn't have things on my head of going into and going to sleep. So it actually allowed me to get this out of my head and actually help with my sleep quality a lot more. So if you're going to prioritize the specific routine, I say focus on the evening versus focusing on the morning, and it's going to make your morning that much better. All right, getting to the last two here. So number 9 is if you want more, you have to invest more. And this was something that I did this year. I invested more this year in my own work, in my own growth than I ever have in any other year. And investment comes in a lot of different ways. It comes from time, it comes from attention, it also comes from money. So, yes, it's money. I invested more money this year and capital into my own growth and the work that I'm doing than any other year. And from that is it far exceeded the lineage and the growth that I got in any other year. And this attributes into if you want certain rewards, you have to invest back in yourself. Nobody gets it just on their own accord. You have to invest. And oftentimes, if you don't have a lot of capital, that's fine. But putting in even more time or more attention, anything that is worth it, you have to invest. And even if you invested before, if you want to get to another level, is you have to invest at another level. And it's a challenging thing because I mean, this idea of minimalism out there and minimum effective dose, and it's popular in training. And I remember when Pat Flynn came on the podcast, we talked about this, and he had a great line where he said, minimalism doesn't mean minimal effort, is you still have to put the most amount of effort into it. And so maybe you only need to do a few things in order to get really good results, but you still need to do a lot within those few things. Need to put in really powerful focus, really powerful attention. And yeah, maybe you don't need to do a wide variety of things, but if it is only a few things that you're focusing on, it doesn't mean you need to put a minimum effort into it. You still need to put a maximum effort into the minimal things. So this was a powerful thing that I realized going into this year is if I wanted to get to another level, I had to invest more. So if you're in that zone of wanting to get to that next level, is you have to look at all your different amounts of currency, time, energy, and money. And if you want to get to that next level, you have to raise up your investment into that next level. All right, last one here, and this was a fun one from here, is reread books. Okay, so I talked about this at the beginning, is I've often talked a lot about a lot of similar messages over this year, and I have no problem repeating myself, specifically if I know the lessons are going to be really powerful. And one of the things that I did this year more than anything else, or any other year, is I reread a lot of books. I love reading and I enjoy it. It's a thing that I enjoy for leisure as well as for growth. but I reread a lot more books this year than I did before. And I think this is one of the most powerful things is because if you reread something, you are reading it again for the first time, okay? Because you're a different person when you reread it. Oftentimes, you have different perspectives, you've grown in different ways. And going back to books that have been really powerful for you before, you go back and you learn new lessons from the same thing. So I always thought of this is that I remember watching The Neverending Story as an adult after not seeing it for like 15 years and watching that from my own like adult eyes in like my 30s versus we used to watch it as kids all the time growing up. And I was like, I picked up on so many more insane things about that movie than I never grabbed before as a kid because I had a new perspective. I went through a lot more in life. And I think this is the same thing when you're going into reading or trying to expand your knowledge base. And this was one of the most powerful things that I did. I wanted to share five of the books that I reread. Actually, a couple of these I reread multiple times this year because they were that powerful. So the first one was Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield. So Stephen Pressfield, one of my favorite authors, he's a great fiction writer, but he wrote two of the most powerful nonfiction books. One is The War of Art, which I think is his most popular book. But the other one he wrote, which is similar, is called Turning Pro. And there's some lines and messages in this book that are so great, specifically about doing the practice for the practice itself, and it turns into something a lot more noble, a lot more powerful for you, and it turns into a practice. That was the biggest lesson from this. But it's a very short book. He writes in almost paragraphs and short and like shorthand, so you can read it in like a weekend. But as far as the lessons of getting into creative ventures or really getting to a deeper level of consciousness, Pressfield's book is one worth reading and then rereading again. Okay. Number two is The Dark Side of Light Chasers by Debbie Ford. So if you are into Jungian work of psychology of the shadow and really embracing all sides of yourself, getting into both the dark side as well as the light, Debbie Ford has some amazing meditations in there and practices that she does along with the theories that she has. One of the most powerful meditations came from this book where you actually go in and meet your strongest self and your shadow self and actually build a conversation with them. It takes some time. It takes a little bit of investment of energy to get into it, but an incredible practice. And if, as far as really getting into overcoming old patterns, old self, and wanting to get into your best self, this is one of the best books to reread. Okay. Number three is Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. If you listen to me at all or anything with personal growth, you've probably read this book. If you haven't, get on it right away. This book, I get more and more out of this every single time I reread it. I probably read it four times through now, a couple different translations. But this is still one of the most powerful books ever. I think it's just the most interesting book in the world because this was not a book that anybody was ever supposed to read. This was a personal diary from the most powerful man in the world. Okay. He could do literally anything at his time of being alive. And the messages that he writes are so human, so relatable about not feeling like being able to get out of bed, struggling with some of the most common, just human nature things in the world with as the most powerful person alive. And if you haven't read this, read it. If you have read it before, read it again. You always get more and more out of this. I'll probably read it again in 2025 at some point. But yeah, one of the most powerful. Uh, Fourth one is an ebook, is called Iron Cardio by Brett Jones. So Brett is one of my dear friends, great coach. I worked with him for 14 years, and his book Iron Cardio I've talked about numerous times on this podcast. But if you are looking for really balancing the line between having a structured program and getting to more intuitive training, there is no better book out there than Iron Cardio. Okay, it's a specific book on one kettlebell protocol, but the way that he has not only put this book as far as like a framework, but actually all his practices and how he's implemented into his own life and his journey is, I think, one of the greatest training books out there. So for physical strength, for physical health and strength training, this book is the best that I've read. I've read it multiple times this year. I go back to it in certain chapters and certain practices. Yeah, this is one that you can get. So I don't know if there's a hard copy, but you can get it on BJJ Fanatics or go into Brett Jones's Instagram handle. I believe there's a link there. Go and grab a copy of that. And then the last book is Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. This is the book that this and Way of a Peaceful Warrior, I think, are the two books that I've reread more than any other in my life. Probably up to about a dozen now. But for anybody who is, I mean, it's a productivity book, it's a time management book, it's great for business. This is just a book that everybody needs to read. It's still like 20 plus years down the line is still the most relatable book and one of the best books that you can do for implementing practices into your life to be as effective and efficient as possible. So, as you can see, I mean, I've reread this copy now. It's ripped. It's been through hell and back with me on this, but that book's the most powerful. So, all right, that's 10. I'll leave it on that. Guys, thank you so much for your support. Hope you have a great holiday season, onwards and upwards. I have some great guests that are lined up going into the new year. This is truly one of the biggest blessings to be able to put this show on and to speak to you. And I'm so happy that you've been along this journey with me. So until next time, much love to you. Thank you so much. Have a blessed new year, and we'll see you in 2025. All right, peace.